Welcome to this edition of Careers That Matter. Joining me now is Jess Ketchum, who's had a wide variety of interesting careers that have put him in the public spotlight, behind people who are in the spotlight, working with and for and challenging legislators. Jess, welcome. How do you characterize what your job is?
Well, Stu, thanks very much for having me on the program. I'm an advisor to people. I'm an organizer. I pull people together. I try to keep up with the issues of the day, as you know, and very keenly interested in the issues of the day. And so some people would say I'm a fixer. Some people would say, no, I'm probably broken more than I've fixed. But the fact of the matter is I'm an advisor. And I think that's gone on for a long time for me.
So on the surface you go, well, I could advise somebody, but unlike me, who wouldn't get paid for advising somebody, you do get paid. So what is it that you have to have in your advice, which is the weight of your experience and your insight, that makes somebody say, you're a trusted counsel and I want to pay you for your time and your insights?
Over a lot of years, Stu, I've developed a reputation for being very confidential. I mean, when I sit down with CEOs of major corporations or organizations and have a confidential conversation with them about their issues, about their problems, about what's bothering them most, they know they're not going to hear it from anybody else, that they can take that to the bank. So I think that's really important, the credibility. And then my career has been built on word of mouth. So it's, you know, I've been helpful to one organization, one company, one sector of the business community, and that gets around. And so people talk about, referrals. My entire business career has been built on referrals, plus a perception that I can be of assistance to them based on my experiences. And, you know, I had time in government that taught me about how government works, and that was very, very valuable. I worked, I was vice president of communications at Expo. Well, you do that, two things. You work for Jimmy Pattison, and you're vice president of communications for the Expo 86 Corporation, and that sets a reputation for you that certainly has worked for me. And then I've had many experiences since then that are sort of iconic, whether it be expansion of the convention center or the Olympics. I was involved for 12 years in working on the Olympics with John Furlong and so many others, but also with iconic companies, Rocky Mountaineer. Peter Armstrong, the owner of Rocky Mountaineer, would tell you that I was one of the founders of Rocky Mountaineer. He wouldn't sell me any shares at the time, yeah. but I was certainly there at the ground floor. West Fraser Timber, Council Forest Industries, London Drugs, 7-Eleven. I've had all these iconic clients, and so word gets around.
You know, you remind me, Perry Bellegarde, when he was the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, I had him in for a conversation, and he said something quite remarkable. One of the few times that I went, I got to write that down. And he said, if you can't build relationships, you can't build anything. Yeah. So how important then, and I know you talk about confidentiality, but how important is it to you that you have this ability to build relationships, which is about building trust and confidence?
People ask me, I shouldn't say all the time, but quite often, what do you see are your main strengths? And I say building relationships. That's what business is so often all about. But when you're a sole operator like I am, without a big support staff, it's all on me. So it's the relationship that I have with you that means everything. And so there's a trust, there's knowing that I will focus on your issue and come back to you with my very best advice. Most of the times my advice is very measurable. You can figure out whether or not it worked or not.
So what does a typical day look like for you? Like as an advisor, you go, well, what exactly does an advisor do? Do you go into an office or like...
Right. So I realized years ago when I had my own office in a tower that I was the only one there. Nobody was coming to meet with me. I was always going to their offices. So for the past 20 years, I've worked out of my home. Now I have a very efficient home office, but I work out of my home. And I have a business model that many people will tell you is the creme de la creme, because I have retainer clients. I only work on retainer. Therefore, if you use me this month, fine. If you don't use me this month, fine, because you're getting an invoice from me anyway. And that's worked out extremely well for me. Now, because of the type of business that I'm in, the advice that I give, I might be able to provide people with assistance on solving an issue that pays off for them big time. And so they're not so much worried about how much work I do on an hourly basis month to month. So I got to the point, Stu, I don't mind telling you, where I had over a dozen retainer clients, and I'm serving them out of my home office. And I would wake up in the middle of the night fearing that they would all get busy at the same time. Because regardless, I mean, when you have a client that needs you over an issue, you have to jump. You have to respond quickly, and I would feel terrible if I wasn't able to do that. So that was my biggest challenge in my business development, my business career, was balancing the needs of my clients. I actually had 2 clients one time negotiating for the use of my time, and I had to threaten one that I was going to fire him. That's gone on.
So when you wake up in the morning, though, are you scanning, the news? Are you like, what's the process that you go through to get ready, just in case you get one of those calls from one of your clients?
So I'm an early riser, always have been, 5:30. So I'm also news hound. I have to be aware of what's going on out there, but I'm also, by nature, keenly interested. So I have my news sources. I have local news sources, of course, because so much that I'm involved in is provincial in scope. But I have the New York Times, I have the Atlantic, I have the Washington Post. I pay attention to what's going on in the world, so that by 6:30 I'm pretty well tuned up and ready to go. And I'll have 3 or 4 meetings during the day. Now, more recently, of course, we can use Zoom and Teams, and I certainly take advantage of that. But that's kind of my day.
So, how does a kid growing up in the interior? You're from Quesnel, aren't you?
Proudly so.
Proud. Do you sit there as a young, teen, envisioning your future and go, yeah, I think I'm going to be an advisor? Like, what were you looking to do as you were, sort of clearing secondary school?
Well, I was telling someone this morning, I almost joined the RCMP because I played hockey and ball with RCMP teams and had friends that were members, and I had one member who kept stopping me driving my mother's pink and white Plymouth too fast or something, and he was always encouraging me to go to Regina, to go to Depot and have a look at joining the RCMP, and so I in fact did, and almost joined until I realized, boy, I don't do well with people yelling at me very, very much, and so at the end of the day, I decided against that. And I got into business. My uncle owned the Chrysler dealership in Quesnel, and he saved me from myself, I think. He wanted to give me an opportunity. He thought I could be a salesperson. And so at a very young age, I decided to take him up on that offer because he held out a carrot and that maybe at some point he'd want to sell me the business. And it was a very successful business. And so I joined with him.
As a car salesman?
As a car salesman. And unbeknownst to you and so many, for 2 years running, I sold more new cars than any other Chrysler product salesman in Canada out of Quesnel, BC. I won 2 trips. One was to the Playboy Resort Hotel in Lake Geneva. But and I learned that I was a salesperson. I could sell. And again, it was based on relationships, small town, right? And,
so you have this carrot dangling out there that says, and all of this can be yours, my boy.
Yeah.
But you didn't do that.
No.
Why not? Where'd you go?
No, it's interesting. I got very involved in the community, which I always have been, but it started there. And I got involved in the community. I really liked the idea of tourism as an industry from an early point. I was involved in the Chamber of Commerce. I was involved as the founding president of the local festival society, Billy Barker Days, which still operates today.
Yeah.
And I was the founding president. I then became involved with the Caribou Tourist Association, which was one of 9 tourism regions in BC, and I managed that. The borders of my tourism region were the same as the provincial electoral boundaries. Alex Fraser, who had been the mayor of Quesnel for 20 years and who I knew, I actually was mayor for a day, having won a school election, and under Alex's wing. But Alex was an MLA by then and a cabinet minister, and he would phone me because he knew that I traveled around the region talking to businesses, town councils, and we were good friends by that point. And he asked me for he'd asked for advice on what was going on in his riding. Now, nobody knew more about what was going on in the Caribou than Alex Fraser, but I came close.
Yeah.
And then finally, Alex asked me if I would come to Victoria and go to work for him. And
what, as his EA?
As an EA.
Yeah.
I turned him down because I had a 3-year agreement with the Tourism Association, and I had developed a plan and hadn't quite seen it through, and I wanted to do that. And so a year later, he phoned me again and said, last call, and I want you to come to Victoria. So I did, newly married, and Ramona and I moved to Victoria and spent 5.5 years. So I was his basically, today you would call him chief of staff. I was a senior person in his office.
So what was the connection between that and then you winding up at Expo 86?
Well, when Bill Bennett actually intended on dueling the seat of Caribou because it was so large an area.
Let's clarify, that's Premier Bill Bennett.
Premier Bill Bennett, yes. He was going to have 2 MLAs from the Caribou rather than 1. And he asked me if I would run. And back in those days, if Alex Fraser said, vote for him, you were elected. I could have put my dog up, and if Alex had said, vote for that dog had become an MLA. And he was that popular and secure in that riding. So I agreed to run. And then Premier Bennett, for political reasons, decided not to go ahead with the dueling of the seat. So then I had a decision to make, and I realized that I didn't want to be a career bureaucrat, although I had learned after moving from the Caribou Chamber of Commerce mentality I learned that there are many very, very, very good civil servants, public servants, and we're really blessed with a strong public civil service. So I put out the word that I was interested in making a move, and I had been involved with Jimmy Pattison on putting together AirBC. I had worked with his people on that assembly of small airlines into AirBC. I did that on behalf of the government, and first phone call I got was from Jimmy. Mm-hmm. Can you be in my office 8 o'clock tomorrow morning?
Was it the fact that you had sold cars and he had too that sealed the deal?
Interestingly enough, Jimmy and I did talk over the years about the car business and why we enjoyed it, why we liked it. And I'm still a car guy today, big time. And so is Jimmy, 96 years old, still a car guy.
Wow. And so then your career just went, and ultimately you hung out your own shingle and just said, I'm here for advice.
Yeah, after Expo, after I was finished with Expo, I decided that it was a big job. It was one of the biggest communications jobs in North America at the time. What was I going to do and still stay in Vancouver? Because most of those big jobs in communications, were in Toronto.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to move to Toronto. I had the opportunity, but didn't want to do that. So I decided to go into business for myself, become an entrepreneur, and the rest is history. It served me very well.
So what do you think is the most important personality characteristic that you possess that helped you to achieve your success?
I like people.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. I like people. And I think I'm able to develop those relationships pretty quickly. I was able to leverage my network. And I tell mentees, and I mentor a lot of young people today, that pay attention to your network development. Every time you meet somebody, mark it down. Mm-hmm. Mark down their phone number. Mark down their wife's name if you want. I mean, today with databases on your phone, you can do all these things. And you never know who's going to be able to help you in the future, who you might need in the future to help you. It might be just to answer a question. But develop that network and really, really pay attention to it. So I'm a good networker. And as you and I know, we've connected over so many different things over so many years. Mm-hmm. It's pretty amazing, but it's because we have that connection. And so I've always thought that was a primary strength of mine, being able to, I like people, I'm curious about people, I want to know what makes them tick. I think that's helpful. And I like to pay attention to what's going on out there in the community, and because that's really affected so many of my business relationships. But the networking thing is so important. But then you want to be able to leverage your relationships into more business, and that's what I did. I mean, my first client was West Fraser Timber. And there's a company that's the largest lumber producer in the world today. They started in Quesnel, my hometown, in 1955. 12 employees, 3 brothers. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing story. But based on that one relationship, and they came to me to hire me because I had provided them with advice when I was in Victoria working for the government. And I would provide them with advice periodically and the advice they liked. And so when I hung up my shingle, they were right there. And but based on that, the Council of Forest Industries became a client. Based on that, the Lumber Trade Council became a client. Based on that, Forestry Innovative Investments became a client. And so I leveraged those appointments. Mm-hmm. Rocky Mountaineer became a client long before there was a Rocky Mountaineer. And I worked with Peter Armstrong, the owner, to developed the concept, put forward the bid, and worked with him ever since on Rocky Mountaineer issues. But that became a relationship with Tourism Vancouver, the Tourism Association of BC, CPR. I mean, just on and on and on.
Right. One begets the next.
Yeah. And so, and here I am sitting in my home office and developing these relationships, developing these business opportunities, and developing, I think, thankfully, a reputation on being a can-do guy, right? That I can help them and provide them with value. And at the end of the day, it's the value proposition. What can I provide you that will make you write a fairly significant check to me every month?
Well, congratulations on a successful career, and thanks for giving us a glimpse into how you got there and what your life is like.